Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. We're going to get started in just a minute here. You might have to click the little box that says that you agree that there is live streaming going on. And give us just another minute to let people in. If you're not already muted, you can mute yourselves. Give it just another minute here. Okay. All right. We're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to Gulf Coast Creation Care's 2021 Season of Creation series, Healing and Hope in a Time of Ecological Crisis. My name is Rhoda Benferhat, and we're so glad that you're here with us today. We are live streaming this session to our Facebook page, which will be recorded in speaker view, and we ask that you keep yourself muted and your video off, except when you are speaking during times of sharing. If you are present and signed in with us on Zoom today, you can control whether you watch the session in speaker view or gallery view by toggling the view button in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. This is the first session that will be held at 3 p.m. on 2 Sundays in September and 2 Sundays in October. The second session will be next Sunday, September 26th, and will feature a panel of local Gulf Coast physicians who will give a medical perspective for healing climate grief and anxiety. The third session on October 17th will explore forest immersion therapy with Pat Homer. And the last session on October 24th will address how faith communities can become hubs of resilience with Avery Davis Lamb and Amy Peterson. So we hope you will have a look at the events page on our website and sign up for any of those sessions that interest you. Today, it is my pleasure to introduce to you Liz Moyer Benferhat, who is joining us from the Bronx in New York City. Building on her sociology degree and Jesuit roots, Liz received a Master of Public Administration and Development Practice from Columbia University, which culminated in an appointment to a UN think tank called the Sustainable Development Solutions Network with economist Jeffrey Sachs. In 2018, she launched We Heal for All, a network that uses emerging paradigms and facilitates ways of being that can help us create a world that's more just, sustainable, and beautiful. Her circle model of community-based emotional processing supports change makers through the many normal feelings that come with addressing global, social, and environmental problems, and adds to a body of work specifically dedicated to climate anxiety and eco-grief. Liz is going to explore with us different emotions surrounding the climate crisis and how collective healing is not only necessary, but also possible for our complex times. Thank you so much for being with us today, Liz, and I'll now turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Rhoda. Thank you. It's a real honor to be here. And I know I've just got a couple videos that are turned on, but I just am taking it in, and I want to welcome you to my home here in the Bronx. So there's so much that I want to share and get through, so I'm just going to dive on in here. And as I do, just give you a little overview of what this presentation is about and what my hopes and goals are for this presentation. So what we'll do here over the next hour is really dive into this emerging conversation and field of practice research around the psychological impacts of climate change. What we know, what we don't know, and then bring that into how do we practice creating resilience in the face of the large scale changes that we're in the midst of. And so what I'll do is I'll share, there's going to be some participatory elements in this, so which you're welcome to join in or not join in on, depending on what feels right for you right now. And then at the end, what I'll do is offer up a brief emotional mindfulness exercise. I was sharing with Rhoda and the folks who are organizing this Gulf Coast Creation Care previously, before jumping on here, that this conversation about climate change and the psychological impacts of climate breakdown, it's new, it's emerging, and as such, really we're all pioneers and guinea pigs within this conversation and within figuring out what it means to sustain long-term engagement, what it means to engage and be of service to these changing times and climate injustice. And so really turning to our own personal lived experiences and looking to those as insight is really key in this conversation, in my humble belief. So that's why we'll take some time at the end there to do a little bit of that. So diving in and beginning, I'd like to invite in a land acknowledgement just off the top here. And for those who aren't familiar with land acknowledgements, it is a small gesture of decolonization to really take a moment here, especially for those of us who live in areas of settler colonization, to just acknowledge the land that we're on and the history of the land that we're on and the indigenous communities that cared for the land and lived in right relationship with the land. So you're welcome to read along as I read this out loud. You're welcome to also close your eyes or keep your eyes at a soft gaze and turn it into a little bit more of a meditation or prayer. However you'd like to participate. I'm taking a deep breath as I begin to read. We honor the history and original inhabitants of the land that we are on, whether that be our own ancestors or different people. Wherever we are in the world, we pay homage to the original people, communities, and cultures who cared for the land and lived in right relationship with the earth. We honor and show gratitude for the land itself. In areas of settler colonization, we mourn any and all injustices that have separated the Native people from their land, and the injustices that continue to affect Indigenous people throughout the world to this day. We hold hope that their wisdom as the original protectors of Mother Earth may light our way forward. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. So I'm going to stop share just for a second because I want to connect with everyone just face to face. So moving into this next portion of the webinar, I'd like to turn it all to you all. We've got a wealth of wisdom here to source from. And so before even diving in and sharing some of the conceptual frameworks that I've been gathering around making sense of the psychological impacts of climate change, I wanted to turn to you all to see what we have here. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to share a link to this very cool tool. It's called Mentimeter. If maybe some of you have used it before. So if you're joining us on the webinar on Zoom, you can locate it in the chat. And the question that I want to pose to you all is, what comes to mind, feelings come to mind when you think about the word eco-emotions? So this can be your own feelings. It can be feelings that you're noticing in communities, in your congregations, with your loved ones. And what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to share those words. So what feelings do you associate with climate change, with climate breakdown? And what you'll see here, I just shared my screen again, is as folks share these words, they're going to pop up here on the screen, and we're going to create a really beautiful word bubble, word cloud, if you will. So take your time, look over in the chat box. Beautiful. And begin, and you can share as many as you'd like, and I'll just read them out loud as they start to come in. So anxiety, anger, fear, grief, confusion, yeah. I'm seeing some coming over here in the chat too that I'll read out loud. Awe of nature, sadness, extinction. Yeah, worry for grandchildren, grateful to acknowledge. Beautiful. Yeah, thank you for these. I'm going to stop share. See, we'll come back at the end to see if there's any other ones that were added. But yeah, unique, disturbing emotions. Yeah, thank you for that, Jim. It's so true. It's so true. All of these are really common feelings, common words that we have associated with climate anxiety, with eco grief. And it's an interesting and really emerging field of conversation and practice. So I want to start off with the word climate anxiety because it's really one of the more common terms that's used to describe these really unique and disturbing feelings, sourcing from something that someone said in the chat. And in particular, I'm sourcing some material from a report, a 2014 report from the American Psychological Association that was really one of the first forerunners in terms of dedicated research or dedicated investigation into trying to get an evidence-based understanding of what are the psychological impacts of climate breakdown. And what they found, so climate anxiety as this term, is that a number of very normal feelings can arise with engaging with climate and change, as well as being directly affected by climate change. And we actually have more evidence on the effects and the impacts, the psychological impacts on those who have been directly affected, which makes sense, right? So it's individuals whose livelihoods have been affected by climate change. So these are farmers, these are scientists, folks who have been experienced natural disasters, migrants, those who have had to leave their area, their place of living due to shifts in climate or shifts in their livelihoods. We have evidence that points to how these individuals experience things like post-traumatic stress disorder, for instance. Another question within this conversation of what are the impacts is, what about for those who are witnessing the gradual long-term changes? What kind of psychological impact does this have on them? And this is something that there's less evidence about, less research. What we do know is that we're seeing this emergence of different feelings. I like this one. This was I thought a really nice way of putting it. Uncertainty and unpredictability and lack of control are all hallmark feelings that come with anxiety. And that's really at the center of climate change, this unpredictability, this lack of control. And what we know is these kind of stress-related problems can lead to substance abuse and anxiety disorders, depression. And it can also have effects at a community level, at a group level, at a societal level, in terms of contributing to loss of social identity and social cohesion, as well as greater elevated hostility. This is an image from Psychology for a Safe Climate. And I think it does a really nice job of just painting and kind of organizing the different effects that climate has, right? Both at the physical level, at the medical level, at the mental health level, as well as at the community health level. So I want to share some other terms and perspectives that are part of this conversation. And my hope here is, again, and I was sharing this a bit at the beginning, but my real hope is that you'll walk away with some conceptual frameworks and really, even just some breadcrumbs that you can look into and explore more, that can help you understand your own personal lived experience with climate change, as well as what's happening within your communities, your places of work, and all that other good stuff. So I'll go through this again at a relatively high level. But so climate anxiety can be looked at as a practical anxiety, meaning these feelings of overwhelm, these feelings of anger, these feelings of anxiety are really there to shift behaviors. They're there to lead to creating more solutions, right? Problem solving. So in this way, these feelings, these very normal feelings that come with being of service and, being engaged with climate change can be seen as something that's here to drive us to take action, and can be used and channeled in a certain way, in a constructive way, to take action. Another way of looking at climate anxiety is looking at it from the perspective of it being an existential anxiety. And I think this is particularly interesting and relevant to share with you all here as folks who really see and understand the connection between spirituality and morality and climate action, climate justice. From this perspective of existential anxiety, part of the work of supporting people to grapple with climate change, grapple with what's going on in the world, goes hand in hand with also facing mortality, processing and making sense of loss and change. And then on the other side of that, also developing new senses of our purpose as humans here. What is the purpose of us as humans existing in this world? So really getting at these deeper questions about life and about our roles here on planet Earth right now. Another term that I wanted to briefly introduce is that on solastalgia. And so this is a term that was developed by an Australian philosopher, Glenn Albrecht. And Australia has been doing a lot of really awesome work around this conversation of climate change and mental health. There's a lot of really cool research and work coming from that area of the world. But solastalgia is a term used to describe place-based emotional distress. So it's a combination between the words solace and nostalgia. And when we think about the word nostalgia, it's often tied to the past, right? We're longing for something from the past. But when Glenn Albrecht is invoking within this word, or is seeking to try to capture through this word, is the feelings of longing or despair that are more in the present tense or even in the future. Feeling a disconnect or feeling a mourning of the land as it once was, or what we know it'll change or how it'll change in the future. Moral injury is another really interesting term to explore the feelings that come with climate change. I like to think of moral injury as a second cousin to trauma. And it actually emerged due to needs within the therapeutic community. So therapeutic treatments for veterans returning from war. And noticing that some of the trauma-based ones just weren't actually getting at the need within veterans. And the reason why it wasn't quite serving the needs of veterans is that trauma models of care are based on understanding or looking at the person who's experienced trauma as being a victim, right? That something happened to that person. They were sexually assaulted, they were robbed. There was something that happened to that person, which absolutely happens to soldiers at war without a doubt. And then there was also another dimension of the mental health experiences of veterans that wasn't quite matching up to that, because while at war, they were making choices, right? They were taking actions that then returning to their civilian life didn't match up within that moral universe anymore. It made sense within the moral universe of being at war, but then coming back to civilian life, it didn't quite integrate in, right? It didn't make sense within the moral universe of being a civilian anymore. And I actually want to read this quote, and I'm finding that if I make my screen smaller, that then it pops out, but I think it'll be okay. So a quote from theologian Anita Brock on moral injury is that she describes it as our core moral foundations are unable to justify, process, or integrate the trauma. And therefore, these decisions and these experiences end up haunting us and leading us to question ourselves, our worlds, and God. We become morally injured when our narrative or our belief system doesn't match the reality of our actions and environment. I think this is really applicable to climate change, right? Many of us who are deeply aware of the way that our production and consumption systems, our use of fossil fuels, our primarily profit-oriented business landscape feeds into the destruction of our biosphere. And yet with so few alternatives, it can really be a moral injury to participate in a system that doesn't reflect our values. The last two that I'll share here is around this term of vicarious trauma. And this also comes from the field of therapy and is something that is used to describe experience that that helping professionals will sometimes have, of where they'll absorb the pain of their clients, right? And so circling back to what I was sharing from the APA 2014 report, we have less of an understanding of the impacts of witnessing the fires taking place in California, witnessing the mass migration taking place throughout the world. We have less of an understanding of that, but that's another term that's of curiosity within this conversation. And then the last one is that social and political scientists, since the beginning of modernity, have been really looking at and seeing the presence of anxiety within a society as an indication of a shift in social order. It's thought to be, the presence of anxiety or overwhelm or these kind of emotions are thought to go hand in hand with changes or evolution in culture, shifts in social norms, right? As things are changing from one epoch or one cultural way of being to a new way of being, right? As we have new information, new tools, new technology, a very normal response is to have feelings of anxiety or overwhelm as this cultural shift is taking place. So I would be remiss if I didn't speak to burnout and chronic stress within this conversation of eco-emotions, especially for those of us who are activists, who are change makers, who work directly on this topic. There's a real need to acknowledge the reality of chronic stress and burnout that comes with caring so deeply and feeling the urgency of this topic. Renee Lertzman is a psychologist who does a lot of great work around climate change communication. And she points that this kind of chronic stress can actually It's this funny kind of double-edged sword in a sense, because it's a reflection of the amount of care and the amount of urgency, the sense of responsibility that people feel. But without it being cared for and balanced, it can actually drive people to turn their backs on the things that they care the most about. And it makes sense with such an existential, large-scale topic that we would really need to support people to be able to engage with this reality for the long haul, to figure out how to sustain it. Because burnout can affect us on the personal level as well as on that productivity level, for lack of a better word. So that was my overview of what we know about climate anxiety and eco-emotions. I'd now would like to move us into a conversation about what we know about emotions more generally. Because we live at a really exciting time when it comes to emotions. We have more and more cutting edge research from the fields of clinical psychology and neuroscience to really help us understand what emotions are, their evolutionary purpose, and how best to support them both at a personal level and interpersonal level in community and beyond. So I wanted to just share a little bit about what this emerging field, another emerging field is really saying. And before I even go into this, because it's one of my favorite quotes, but it's exciting to do this, and I feel the real need to do this too, because while this research is coming out more and more, it hasn't quite permeated our culture and our institutions yet. This is something globally that we know that really emotions are still something quite taboo. They're quite taboo. And so it's my hope that in presenting more of this information and doing this work of coming together in community and really permitting and validating and supporting each other with these very normal emotions. I like to say, if you're feeling that funky good stuff, it means you're paying attention. It means you're paying attention, because there's so much going on in the world. So to feel these types of feelings, the overwhelm, the urgency, the grief, the rage, it means that you're paying attention, and we can learn how to support that. We can learn how to channel that and how to really, permission that amongst each other. So this is one of my favorite quotes. It's from Eugene Gundlin, who is the founder of focusing therapy. And he says, "Nothing that feels bad is ever the last step." Such a beautiful, beautiful quote, a beautiful exploration, really. Because so often I think that one of the things that keeps us from feeling our feelings, that keeps us keeping our emotions at bay, is a fear that I'll get consumed by these, or I won't be able to stop feeling. And what we're learning from the cutting edge research that's coming out of these fields is that that's actually not the case. When the proper conditions and tools are in place, this type of tension, these kind of challenging emotions, are actually an indication that we can transform and that we can heal. So at a high level, what are emotions? So what we're learning from these fields is that at its core, emotions are hardwired into us from eons of evolution. And they're really here to help inform us about our own needs and our environment in order to drive us to act and help us adapt to the changes going on. Emotions are rooted in the body, right? There's a strong connection between the physiology and the nervous system. Emotions are like waves. They all have their own course that they run through. And emotions just are, which again, I love, especially within the context of emotions still being something that are often looked down upon, right? Or misunderstood. They just are. So I think especially those first 3 bullets there, that emotions are information. that with the right conditions, with the right support, we can learn how to listen to our emotions and hear what they're telling us, hear what they're saying to us, and use that as fuel to adapt and to take action in the way that's healthy, in the way that some vitality. So this is just, I always enjoy sharing this. This is the change triangle. It's adapted by Hilary Hendel Jacobs from a therapeutic modality called accelerated experiential dynamic psychotherapy. And really, this therapeutic modality is taking a lot of this cutting edge research and putting it into the therapeutic context on that dyadic level, that one-on-one level. And I like to present this because I think it just offers a nice framework for starting to think about one's internal experiences. That we all have these core emotions: fear, anger, sadness, disgust, joy. And if we can work through our defenses, work through inhibitory emotions to come into those emotions and process them, that we can come into more open-hearted states. We can come into states that are more truly connected to our authentic self. With all of these things, compassion, confidence, curiosity, courage, being attributes, being ways of being that we need to be of service to this time of climate change. So the question stands, how do we take what we know about emotions and bring them into the community context? How do emotions like to be supported within community? Well, some things that we know is that by undoing aloneness, emotions feel more comfortable to come forward and to be lived, right? Shame is the biggest things that keeps our emotions in hiding and keeps them from fully living out those waves, so that we can get to that more open-hearted space. So even coming together in community around these topics, around these very normal feelings, is a huge step. Naming and sharing the feelings. Putting words to the felt sense is a great way to support emotions. Permitting and validating. So, I like to think about these things across different contexts. But, so this could be something if it's, so what I do, and I'm going to get to this in a little bit, is that I have a circle model called the We Heal for All circle model, where we gather in community and use simple exercises to be able to support emotional processing in community. These same principles, and I'm going to share a bit more about that in a second here, but these same principles can be applied in all sorts of different settings. I'm thinking about the educational setting, for instance, as a professor, as a teacher. Permitting and validating feelings, you can do that either explicitly by welcoming and saying, hey, what you're feeling is really welcome here, or you can do it implicitly, right? By sharing and being vulnerable yourself. So there's a lot of ways to permit and validate. Witness and supporting, so being seen, right? Emotions being seen, again, that connects to the undue aloneness. And then resonating and empathizing, right? So that, and again, it connects to that undue aloneness piece, but really feeling that you're not alone, noticing and seeing that what you're feeling, somebody else is feeling as well, is a really strong way to support emotions. So tying this all together, connection creates resilience. That's the title of this talk. And again, I just want to thank you and welcome you here within this talk and within this conversation. Because again, going back to this piece around burnout, burnout is a really common thing that we see, or overwhelm, right? That it's just too much to bear. It's too much to handle. So we've got to disconnect from it sometimes, right? We got to disconnect from it in general. It's coming back to this concept of connection creates resilience. Needing resilience in the face of burnout, needing resilience in the face of being in this for the long haul. And it's such a beautiful concept, this connection creates resilience piece, because we see it across society, we see it across fields of discipline, whether we're talking about spirituality and connection with source, creating resilience, whether we're talking about connection with loved ones, connection with family, connection with community, or whether we're talking about the economy, right? And how strong networks help economies bounce back after breakdown. So it's a beautiful principle that I think has a lot to offer us here. And I'll say one more thing, from a more spiritual or philosophical perspective too, we can look at climate change as really being rooted in patterns of human disconnection. Whether it's related to disconnect us as people, right? Being disconnected from our bodies, from our sense of selves, from our purpose, disconnected from each other and community, or disconnected from the larger web of life and the interconnectedness that's inherent to being on planet Earth and being part of planet Earth. So something here too, in terms of practicing connection at all levels, that can really offer us the resilience that we need for facing the changes going on. So just a little overview of resilience, just because I like to ground things in some definitions here. So resilience, again, and we're going back to that word adaptation. How do we adapt well in the face of adversity? And what's cool is that what we know is that resilience isn't something that some people have and others don't. It's not a personality trait. It's connected to behavior. It's something that can be learned and developed. And that's also true about sensitivity, which I think is very cool. Another conversation for another time. So tying this all together, weaving this all together, I've had the real privilege and honor and joy over the last several years of really diving deep into how do we support each other with the many normal feelings that comes with global and cultural change. And this pillar of connection creates resilience has been the centerpiece of this for me, both from the more psychological and even social support dimension, as well as from that deeper spiritual dimension. What buoys do we connect to? What do we ground ourselves in the face of such transition? Right? How do we create containers where this evolution can take place? Both the cultural evolution, the spiritual evolution. Where can we go in order to kind of hold all the change that's going on and support it in a way that can give birth or allow the newness that is right at our door to emerge? And so it's through the circle model that I've developed that we really use connection as the core of our practice. Through meditation or an internal awareness practice, we connect with ourselves. Through storytelling and resonance practice or embodied empathy, we connect with each other. And then through prayer or visualization, we connect beyond. So that's a bit about, and I'll just share real quick that, these circles are ones, the vision and the hope, the intention of this circle model is really to, like I was just sharing, support each other with the very many normal feelings and create containers where new wisdom can emerge. And then also the vision of this project and of this work is also to support others in bringing their unique healing wisdom online into their communities. So it's been a real blessing over the past 2 years to develop out a training program to support people in taking this circle model and really making it their own, adapting it, bringing it to their communities, and creating this middle one. I'm looking at that middle picture here, that network, creating even more of a network of support and connection that is needed right now. So I wanted to pause here before going into the next section of this talk, this hangout, this webinar, and see if there's any questions on what I just presented there. After this, we'll go into the emotional mindfulness exercise, but I figured it's good to do a Q&A at this point, just for the next 5-7 minutes or so before going into that next part. So you're welcome to raise your hand if you know how, if you're familiar with how to do that in the React section. You can also, Rhoda, would it be okay if people just unmuted themselves?
Yes, certainly people can unmute themselves and just speak, or as Liz said, raise your hand or put a question in the chat box, however you feel comfortable.
Perfect. Great. Bob, would you like to go?
Yes. I think we'll probably get into this next week, so I don't want to get too far ahead of it, but I think there is probably a lot of anxiety and other symptoms of climate change illness that is not recognized as being climate related now. And so I would be interested to know if you have any, well, do you have any comments about that? Is there an uptick in the symptoms you're describing that we know might be related to climate anxiety, but which people are not aware that that's really what's going on?
It's an awesome question and an observation. I think you're right. The one person's work that comes to mind off the top of my head is Renee Lertzman, who I mentioned in the presentation briefly. But she's done work on what she calls environmental melancholy, and in particular in rural areas, pointing to larger patterns or themes of downtroddenness and heaviness, and connecting that to unconscious environmental despair, for lack of a better word. So I would definitely recommend checking out her work. She has a whole book and a series of research on that, which is really fascinating.
Liz, Riva has put a question about the change triangle. I don't know how hard it would be for you to pull that up. She's asking what was on the right side of the change triangle. And
Yeah, no problem. Absolutely. And I even want to, Hillary Hendel Jacobs is the author of that. She adapted that change triangle from something more technical and more like inside baseball for therapists. So I would point you to her wealth of resources on this. She's really the one who's been spearheading that. But in terms of on the right side of the change triangle, that one is inhibitory emotions. So those are, so if we think about there being core emotions, and some pieces of literature look at 5, some look at 7, but just the core emotions that really need to be processed in order to come into that more open-hearted state. There are also things like anxiety and shame, and then there's also defenses that often keep us from accessing those feelings. I would definitely recommend looking into her work to go a bit deeper on that.
So Riva, she has put the name of the author of that model into the chat box, Hillary Hendel Jacobs. And we have another question from Jim Kimmel. What mechanisms, methods, etc., are useful for the circle process, especially in church contexts? And have you had any faith communities want to use this or train in this?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a big question, and I would be curious to hear more about exactly what you mean by mechanisms and methods. So I have, in church context, it'll be new, which would be awesome to work with folks who are in congregations that you would like to bring this to. I've worked with coaches and with yoga teachers and spiritual practitioners in that sense. So, and the way that I train, the training program that I have set up is really meant for people to learn the nuts and bolts of this circle model and then bring their own unique spin to it. So if folks want to make it completely secular, they're welcome to do that. And that's where the field of ecology is really nice to offer insights on how to do that. Making it more inherently spiritual, which is really the core of it for me, is also something that can very easily be done. And then weaving in specific scripture or specific types of tools that are specific to your community is I share where and how best to do that as well. Oh, yes, Jim.
Yes, you asked more specifically what I mean. I'm on the Creation Care Committee for our diocese of West Texas, and also for our parish, St. Mark's in San Marcos, Texas. And we're very active, especially at St. Mark's. We've got websites. We're doing a lot of things. I got a grant from the Episcopal Church a few years ago to develop a faith-based program. And, those things are there, but we have trouble sort of getting in, to make ourselves seen within the parishes and within the diocese. And I've been in the environmental field for 60 years, and I've seen things come and go, and most of them not work very well. And it's time for us to do something that does work well. And this sounds very exciting to me, but I would really like to know and work with you. I'd be delighted to, whatever way we can to work with you as we do things. We can let you know what they're doing, and we can exchange experience.
I would love that. I would absolutely love that. Because I find, and I wonder if this is what you mean, I find that this work is a lot about education, even in terms of offering community-based emotional processing, offering a circle to a community in a community context. I find even writing up a description and inviting people, it requires educating people within that as well. And connecting dots between the value of emotional processing to a dot around the fact that there are feelings that come with being of service and engaging with these topics. So I would love to talk more and learn more about your needs in your community and partner together on that. That would be awesome.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. So I want to see if there's we got one more minute for any other questions before we go into this next part here, because I also want to honor our time here, closing this off at the hour.
Yeah, a quick question. I agree with Jim that we've got to get ourselves under control. We've got to confer with the smaller groups, and then we've got to project into a larger scene. And it seems to me very, very important that you find traction in there for having some prospect of success, of getting traction and engaging on the larger issues. And if you don't, it seems like that can cycle back into depression and giving up. And I know that's a small question. Any thoughts?
What comes to mind to me is just, and this is something that a teacher offered me once is suffering without purpose is it's just suffering, right? Knowing that there is a purpose and there's a purpose to the struggle, there's a purpose to the challenge, there's a purpose, a greater purpose. And so that greater purpose can result in, actionable results, can be a spiritual sense of where we're going, evolutionarily speaking, spiritually speaking. So that's what it feels like, a larger conversation, which I'm really happy that you brought up. And I think you're right. Also, connecting this work, healing oriented work is not meant to be a bypass. It's not meant to live on its own. It's meant to be a complement and go hand in hand with action, with education. So that's also what I heard in your statement. Thank you for that.
So Liz, we have Sonia Crawford, who is asking about your Jesuit background and commenting about the exercises with the
Yeah. I had the privilege of being educated by a Jesuit institution in Philadelphia, St. Joseph's University. It was definitely a bedrock for me in terms of being ruined as a term that is used within that space in the absolute best way. And absolutely the reflections, the reflections that the Ignatian values offer and invite students and into is absolutely part of all of this. I appreciate you asking. So Rhoda, if we go into this exercise and it goes a little bit over the top of the hour, is that okay?
Yes, I believe Liz is going to take us through a little sample maybe of her work that we can get a better idea what she's talking about. And so obviously we're going to aim to be done at 4 o'clock or around there, but if there is some valuable sharing going on, it's okay to run over a few minutes, yes.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so this is an exercise that I like to do at the beginning of my circles sometimes, or in other kind of work settings. And what it is, and kind of going back to that connection piece, it's an opportunity to connect with ourselves and to turn inward, connect with our internal worlds, and notice what we notice or as it relates to climate. And so this is something that is helpful for connecting with and providing more insight into our own unique climate feelings, because we're all unique, right? And then it also is something that you could take and bring to your community or bring to your people, because that's a big part of the mission of We Heal for All, supporting others in doing this work. So what this will look like is be a guided meditation, or you can think of it as an internal awareness exercise. It'll be about 5 minutes long, and at the end you are welcome. We can take some time to just hear some shares from some people if anyone would be willing and interested in sharing. It could also be something that you then just journal about or you draw. It can be a springboard for further reflection for yourself or further dialogue for us in this space right now, or if you bring this and use this at another time. So for those who would like to participate, you're welcome to just make yourself comfortable and close your eyes or keep your eyes at a soft gaze, whatever feels most supportive to you, most comfortable to you right now. And as you do so, as you start to just settle in right now and come into this exercise after listening, after using more of the intelligence of the mind, begin with a few nice deep breaths. Where you send some breath all the way down to the lowest part of your belly, expanding your rib cage, the top of your chest as you inhale. And as you exhale, allowing yourself just to let go of anything that needs to be let go of right now. Using your breath to support you in settling and arriving in this moment. Being really gentle with yourself as you do so. And from here, beginning to notice what your body feels like right now. Perhaps where your body is in contact with the earth, your feet on the floor, sit bones on a chair or cushion. And just take in that sensation, noticing what that feels like. Coming into this practice and play of observing things from the place of a curious, compassionate witness. It's not judging or placing a story on what you see. Just taking it in as interesting information. And then from here, gently turning your attention inward a little bit more so, moving from your body to your internal world. Noticing what your mind is like right now, what your emotional landscape is like. Maybe even subtle sensations in your body. And again, welcoming all that you notice. Everything from sense of ease, from tension. From here, what I'll do is I'll read a paragraph about the climate crisis. And the invitation here is, as you hear my words, as you hear me speak, continuing with that internal observation and noticing what you notice, noticing what arises, noticing, knowing that all information is useful and valuable, including frustration, including wanting to turn away. The climate crisis we are presently facing is an unprecedented disruption of the Earth's biosphere and ecosystems, further exacerbating systems of oppression and structural inequality. As our planet heats up, we are experiencing rapid species and habitat loss, ice sheet melting and rising sea levels, as well as worsening storms, wildfires, and flooding. All of this has grave implications for social, political, and economic systems. We are seeing food and water scarcity increase, mass migration rise, and mounting geopolitical tensions. The countries and communities that have contributed the least are experiencing the impacts the most. Taking a nice deep breath here. Gently bringing a little bit of movement into your fingers and into your toes as you gently bring your attention from that internal space back into the room that you're in. Very gently as you do so, eventually fluttering your eyes open and returning to the room that you're in and our shared screen. Taking a few moments here to jot down or draw or write anything that you noticed throughout that. And again, it's all valuable information before we open the floor to see if anyone is willing to share.
I'll just say that when I think about what we're doing to the planet, I have a overwhelming sense of mournfulness for the harm that we're doing to each other and to the planet, for the suffering, for the immense suffering that's happening. And I feel distressed as to why it's so hard for us to be compassionate and just do the right thing. It seems like it would be natural. So a lot of mournfulness and a lot of distress.
Thank you, Rhoda. Thank you.
So that exercise, if I may, this is Joey, Deacon Joey. In that space of a minute and a half, 2 minutes, it took me from a feeling of orientation at the very beginning as I settled down, and I felt as though at the end of that point I was one with God, one with creation. And then as you introduced climate change, I'm in the Diocese of Louisiana, so we just went through Hurricane Ida. It brought back the feeling of disorientation and how I understand that I'm still one with, but one with and also separated from that peaceful place where I was when I came into it. And then coming out of it, I felt as though my hope was to be reoriented, not to go back to where I was at the very beginning, but to find a way forward to reorient this disorientation and hope to where I am again, one with God, one with one another, and one with all of creation. So it was that constant life of orientation, disorientation, reorientation that I went through in about a minute and a half, and being aware of it.
Thank you. Bob, I saw you had your hand raised.
Yes, I did. And really what I had written down was very similar to what Deacon Joey just spoke of as you took us into that contemplative space there through the breath prayer. I sensed first a release and a relief and freedom. And then as you began reading your paragraph, it turned on me. It turned into sadness and into anger, and finally, I hope, into resolve. So it was like a sudden jolt to what had been a very peaceful place in God, to a realization that, wait a minute, things are not okay, and we have to do something.
Thank you. I saw some comments in the chat box as well. Reva said, a tear coming from my eyes. Lella said, breathing became more shallow. Teeth were clenched. Jim said, a tangible increase in anxiety. Just want to thank you all for sharing this. And I just feel within my own self, just creating a lot of space for all of these feelings and all of these shares. And really wanting to honor these. Really wanting to honor these. Would anyone else like to share just as we're closing out here? And then I'd love to just take us through again, just a little closing meditation, closing contemplative practice to move some of this energy a little bit. Beautiful. Thank you. And so just closing your eyes again, if you feel comfortable doing so, or just turning your attention inward again, just a little bit. And knowing that what arose for you, what you noticed, had just a little bit of time to be seen, a little bit of time to be shared. And knowing that all of these feelings deserve so much more. Taking a nice conscious breath here, a nice rejuvenating breath here. And taking a nice gentle scan of your body, starting with the top of your head and moving gently down your body, past your face and head to your shoulders, your chest and back, your belly, down to your legs, your shins, your feet. Imagining roots going down from your feet into the earth below you. As you connect with Mother Earth, with God's creation. Turning to her, turning to God for any support that you may need in this moment, in this journey, in this work. Offering Mother Earth any words of prayer, gratitude, reverence. Before gently bringing your attention back up into the center of your heart, back into any part in your body that feels connected and resourced. And offering yourself any words of gratitude or prayer in your unique journey and your unique calling. Taking a nice final breath here before once again gently bringing some light movement into your fingers, into your toes, as you gently transition back into the room that you're in. Eventually fluttering your eyes open when the time is right for you, and returning to our shared screen. I want to thank you all so much for joining me today, joining us today, and trusting me in that exercise as well. That is a small sample of what a larger circle experience is like. And as a gift and invitation to you all, I have an upcoming circle this Wednesday at 6:30 p.m. my time, so that's Eastern Standard Time, and I would love for you to join. So I want to share a code to join for free of cost in the chat box too. So that's shared there for the participants here who are here in the Zoom. And I'll also just put my email address in here too, because I would love to stay in touch and continue this conversation. Handing it over to you. Anything that you want to say as we close out?
No, I will invite those who are on the planning committee for this webinar series to stay on the call for a few minutes. We're going to have a debrief if you'd like. I want to thank you so much, Liz, for that moving experience and for introducing us to the process of circle healing and all of your information about emotions dealing with climate change. I want to thank everyone here for taking the time out of your Sunday afternoon to join us. Please have a safe and joyful week, and you will be getting a follow-up message, and I will include in that message Liz's information for you to have as well. So thanks again, everybody. Have a safe and joyful week, and I'm going to end the live stream right now. Thank you for coming.